Hello, and welcome to Independent Lifestyle's Board of Directors training. We're glad you're here. We're going to talk about the Carver Policy Governance Model and the board's leadership roles. ILICIL has used this model to govern the organization for over a decade. It is meant to be a brief overview to introduce you to the model we use and how the policies are structured. The Carver Policy Governance Model was created by John Carver. It's designed for leadership by any governing board in order to enable the quality of leadership which boards are capable. It allows boards to establish guidelines for the executive director and the organization to accomplish its goals while clearly and succinctly delineating boundaries and roles. This model uses a different style of language and approach. It's important that you're ready and open for new learning. This model can feel counterintuitive until you master it, especially if you have a lot of traditional board experience. Governance is truly a different model which requires boards to function differently than traditional models. The board occupies a special place between the organization's owners and the operating organization. The Carver model uses the one-voice principle, which says that the responsible board adheres to a very strict rule that the authority of the board resides in the board as a body, not in members of the board. As a board member, you need to not hide your disagreement when it occurs. However, you're obligated to support the legitimacy of all board decisions. No individual board member has any authority to voice their help or advice. Unless the board has spoken with one voice, it has not spoken at all. In other words, the message to the executive director is that board members' ideas can be ignored, but board decisions cannot be. The Carver model helps us in setting expectations by establishing policies. Carver uses policies versus objectives, strategies, plans, etc. Policy simply written means written statements of what the board expects of itself and those to whom it delegates. Policy governance is efficient and sets clear roles for the board and the executive director. In policy governance, there are two types of decisions, ends and means. So here's how it works. Every organizational decision or action that describes the effect to be produced by the organization for an intended recipient outside the organization is an ends decision. Every designation of the cost or priority of the effect is an ends decision. Ends decisions are only those that designate results, recipients, and worth of results. All other decisions are naturally non-ends decisions, but means decisions. For example, ends expressed by an organization for people with disabilities might be people with all disabilities will live as independently as possible. Running the programs that teach independence is not an ends issue. So the distinction is, ends means distinction focuses our attention on the fact that activities and results are not the same. Ends take getting used to. They're not the same as goals or objectives or plans. Ends are simply a designation of organizational results, who gets the results, and the cost or priority of the result with no contamination by methods used to achieve or support them. Means include governance, finance, human resource issues, and all organizational actions including programs, services, and curricula. Governance itself is a uniquely board means, while all other means are operational. There are three categories of policy that add up to everything. Ends, which says the board with a long-term perspective and with the input of owners and advisors creates policies that prescribe what is to be produced, for whom, and at what worth. Board means the board creates policies that prescribe its own job and conduct. And operational means the board, in order to optimally control the operating organization, creates policies with a peculiar but very important characteristic. These policies tell the CEO what not to do rather than what to do. Again, remember, this is very different from traditional practices that are tell us what you do process. There are some problems associated with boards prescribing operational means. If a board prescribes the ends to be accomplished and what it wants to hold the CEO or executive director accountable for their accomplishment, telling the CEO how to do it causes a big problem. What if the board's means don't work? Who is accountable for the failure to produce the ends? What if they do work? Who's accountable for success? Simply, it's not fair to hold the executive director accountable for decisions made by the board. So prescribing means has the effect of relieving the executive director of accountability or of imposing unfair blame. In order for the board to prescribe means well, it has to be as knowledgeable about running the organization as the executive director should be expected to be, which is unrealistic and unnecessary. It has the effect of reducing management's ability to operate with agility, creativity, and responsiveness. If board approval is required for means decisions, management can manage only as responsibly as the board can issue approvals. To tie full-time management decision-making to a part-time board schedule is ineffective. There is no logical need for the board to do all the work associated with prescribing operational means. The board's concern would be wise to be concerned about effective means. The board can easily find out if effective means were used. It simply has to find out if the ends were accomplished. So you're probably asking, isn't the board responsible for everything? Yes. Policy governance boards set expectations about operational means by describing what would be unacceptable to the board, even if effective. What, you might ask? Stating what is unacceptable does not draw the board into telling the CEO or executive director how the organization should be run, so the board does not need to know all the operational methods well enough to dictate them. Stating what is imprudent or unethical is within the grasp of all board members. It also frees staff to be creative, responsible, and agile with respect to means. They can do whatever it takes to produce the board-required ends as long as they avoid board-prohibited means. Some points to remember. You are on the board to govern, not manage. Using your area of expertise to draw your colleagues into setting prescriptive requirements for operational means is an inappropriate use of authority. The most you can do is make yourself available to the CEO on a strictly advisory basis. Aware the strictly advisory means the CEO or executive director is under no obligation to take your advice. We know sometimes negative wording feels unnatural. It may even feel alien. But what it does is prevents the board's irresistible tendency to apply their considerable wisdom, either real or imagined, to telling subordinates how to do their jobs. Using negative language is a constant reminder to boards and their members that prescription of operational means is to be avoided at all costs. The psychological effect of using this sort of control is very positive for the executive director. He or she is being told that as long as disallowed means are avoided, any means decision he or she makes is authorized by the board. So what is the board's job? It's prescribing ends and prohibiting unacceptable means. Board policies precede and are separate from all other decisions and documents. The board will have made policies that cover everything in the organization, but it has done so by addressing the broader levels of all issues, not all the specifics. The more detailed levels are for the CEO or their delegate to decide. There are no additional board documents. Though staff will have many of their own documents for internal purposes, this means that the organization's budget, strategic plan, and other documents commonly embraced by the board are really management's documents. So how does ILICIL's Board of Directors monitor organizational performance? We use two very unique tools. One is the board monitoring schedule, and one is the executive director reports, which are provided to the board for every meeting. There are many books and tutorials that explain this model in detail. But these two monitoring reports and schedule will help you stay on track with what the goals and directives of the board have been as prescribed. Once you see our policies, it will make more sense. Don't be afraid to ask questions, and welcome to the ILICIL Board of Directors.